Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to a new video. Gotta address the elephant in the room. I know it's been a while since my last upload. Have had a lot of stuff going on personally. Just a lot of work conflicts with scheduling where I would record on certain days of the week and then that no longer became an available option. And then just a bunch of other small things came up that caused me to sort of lose focus, stop uploading. But I figured there's no better time than now to get back in the game. Sax is back. The Mystic Mac is back. And we're going to be breaking that down today. UFC 329, Mcgregor versus Holloway 2. Everybody who's a fan of the UFC, has been waiting for this for as long as they can remember. I know for me, been a fan of the UFC for a very long time. Really seriously started becoming like a massive fan, watching a lot when McGregor was, having his run, the Cowboy Cerrone fight, the Dustin fight where he broke his, famously broke his leg. I can remember these fights very vividly, and they feel like, there was this whole hype and sentiment behind, okay, this is a McGregor fight week. Like, McGregor, it would be Tuesday, and you'd be like, all right, we're 4 or 5 days away from McGregor fight night. We're a couple days away from the press conference. And I'm feeling that. I'm starting to get that excitement back again that I haven't had in a long time with the UFC. Conor McGregor, nobody better at promoting a fight. I know there's been a couple questionable things that have happened over the last couple years with Conor, but he seems pretty locked in and pretty focused. And I'm super excited for this one. Got a close buddy of mine who's going to be at the fights. He's going to be sending me videos and updates from there. So I'm pretty pumped. I'm excited for him. That's pretty cool. Shout out my boy Tyler, if you're watching this later. And so we're just going to start. We're going to start at fight one. We're going to go all the way up here. We got 14 fights on this card. A lot of great fights on this card. Truly is a stacked card. And our first fight of the night, it's going to be Cody Durden versus Alessandro Costa. Now, this fight's interesting because this is a late notice replacement on the side of Alessandro Costa. He took over for Ode Osborne, who backed out of this fight, I believe, with an injury. Costa has won 2 straight fights against Stuart Nickel and Matt Schnell, both by knockout. He's a decent striker. His losses in the UFC have come to Steve Erceg, Alden Correa, both high-level fighters who I rank pretty highly. He's going to be taking on Cody Durden, who is had a tough stretch of fights. I want to say he lost 4 fights in a row before actually picking up a pretty nice unanimous decision win against Yafel Filo his last time out. I was really excited about picking the side of Durden if he was going to fight Ode Osborne. Now, not so much. Durden's a good wrestler. He does make some mistakes sometimes in his grappling where, he loses position. I think if he could impose a pretty strong game plan of grappling in this fight, he could find some success. But I do think Alessandro Costa is just a little too good of a striker for Durden. 2 straight knockout wins at flyweight. It's going to earn you some cred, some bonus points for sure. And so in this fight, I'm going to be leaning Alessandro Costa. As much as it pains me to, bet against an American top team guy like Cody Durden, somebody who I've been a fan of for a long time. I do think Costa's going to get this one done. The odds support that. Durden, I want to say, was a very slight underdog against Ode Osborne. Now he's plus 215 with Costa at minus 260. So I'm going to lean with Costa. Up next on the card, we got Zach Reese versus Ryan Gondra. This is an interesting one. I haven't been that big of a Zach Reese fan, to be completely honest with you. I think he's a little sloppy at times. I remember a fight he had like 5 or 6 fights ago where he knocked out Julian Marquez in 20 seconds, and I was like, okay, this guy could actually be pretty good. But since then, he hasn't really impressed me. He's coming off of a pretty ugly, it was a split decision loss to Michel Pereira, but it was just a bad fight all in all. It wasn't a good look for him. Gondra, on the other hand, he's pretty new to the UFC. He's only got one fight inside the octagon, aside from his Dana White Contender Series win, where he did knock out Jose Medina. Gandra is a little bit of the smaller fighter here. Zach Grease is a pretty big fighter, especially for middleweight. I know that's caused some problems. I want to say he came in overweight in his last fight. I might be wrong. Reese 6'4", 77-inch reach, whereas Gandra 6'1" with 74-inch reach. Reese is a wild swinger. He likes to, kind of go all out. Usually pretty early. He kind of throws the technique to the side. Gandra has that issue a little bit too, but I think he's a little bit more poised and concentrated. And I just think, he's on a run right now. 9-1, hasn't lost in a couple of years, and coming off a big knockout in his UFC debut, I think he's going to be able to get this one done. He's a slight favorite in this fight. Zach Grease could be a live dog, but he's just too sloppy for me. He's not the type of guy that I like to bet on. So I am going to lean with Ryan Gandra to get this one done, and I do think he can get it done by KO. All right, moving on up the card. Farid Basharat taking on John Garza, another fight that could have been. Garza obviously replacing Ethan Ewing. I was really excited about breaking down this Basharat versus Ewing fight. It was going to be one of my favorite fights of the week. Now we've got a lot of question marks around it. Garza seems to be pretty good. I've seen some tape from him. Has fought a little bit in Fury. Won a couple fights in a row. I want to say he lost like his second fight of his professional career. He's going to be making his UFC debut. He's only 23 years old, so we're the same age, which is pretty crazy. Him and Basharat are the exact same size, 5'8". I think they both have 71-inch reach, if I'm not mistaken. Basharat's going to be a pretty tough opponent to beat in your UFC debut. Undefeated inside the UFC, 15-0 overall undefeated prospect. I believe he is, if he's not ranked, he's right outside the rankings. I think he might be on the new meta rankings. I'm not entirely sure about that. But Basharat's going to be a pretty big favorite here. I think he's going to be about -700 at close. If you like to have fun like me, sprinkle a little $5 on John Garza and root for the dog. That's something I enjoy to do every once in a while, but that's not good betting advice. My betting advice would probably be Basharat to win this one by finish. I think, he's shown a lot of finishing ability in the past. I know he's won quite a few fights in a row by decision. I want to say, 4 fights in a row by decision, but in those fights he has shown some finishing ability. He's dragged some guys into some pretty deep waters. The submission game is pretty good, so maybe lean on the side of a submission if you're going to take anything as a straight for him. If not, I don't know if the money line is good enough value to throw into a parlay. So we're going to lean with Farid Basharat, but we're going to move on up the card. Moving on, Damian Piñas versus Cesar Almeida. Another interesting one. Damian Piñas is he's a pretty good fighter. 9-1, won his UFC debut against Wes Schultz by one of the weirdest knockouts I've ever seen. It literally seemed like just like glancing blows, absolutely flatlined Wes Schultz. And for some reason I thought, this Wes Schultz guy's probably just really garbage, but he's actually coming off of a pretty crazy comeback win with a nasty submission. So maybe it's just Damian is that good. He's taking on Cesar Almeida, former kickboxing world champion. I believe he had a few fights on the kickboxing scene against Alex Pereira, if I'm not mistaken. Inside the UFC, he's been all right. 2 losses, however, one to Roman Kopylov and then most recently to Cesario Alexejic. He is going to be the same height as Damian Piñas, but Piñas is going to have a nearly 5.5-inch reach, and I just think that's a huge advantage. Almeida, 38, coming up on 39, whereas Piñas only 24 years old. That big of a weight, not that big of a weight cut, but that big of an age gap, it almost always favors the younger fighter. And a guy like Damian who's got some great striking, super strong, clearly heavy Muay Thai base. I think I'm going to lean on the side of Damian. Almeida is a pretty good striker, kickboxing background. I want to say some fights in Glory back in the day. He's pretty solid, but I think Damian's going to be too much for him. And I think you're probably going to be able to get Damian at a decent value here. I think minus 200 to minus 250 range is probably what he's going to end at. So I like him. I think he's a pretty good up-and-coming prospect. I rank him in the same world as the Atiba Gauthier and, those type of middleweight prospects. So we're going to lean with Damian, and then we're going to move on up the card to our fifth fight of the night, Tracy Cortez versus Wang Kong. This is an interesting one. Wang Kong seems to be a bit of a one-trick pony. She's got finishing ability for sure. I mean, she is a Muay Thai fighter through and through, has got great striking, but the grappling has seemed a little, suspect throughout her time in the UFC. She's taken on Tracy Cortez, who usually fights with a fairly heavy grappling approach. And I think, there's a good chance that Tracy Cortez can implement some solid grappling in this fight and get this one done. Now, if she stands on the feet, she could get tagged. She did get tagged pretty bad in her last fight against Erin Blanchfield. I don't know. I think, if Blanchfield was fighting Wang Kong, I would pretty obviously take Erin Blanchfield. And I remember, I think, that Cortez-Blanchfield fight was pretty neck and neck when the odds closed. Tracy's younger. She's a little bit shorter with a little bit of a reach disadvantage. But I do think that that's not going to become that big of an issue because I think it's going to be a pretty heavy grappling approach. So I'm going to lean on the side of Tracy Cortez here. You'll probably get her at some good value. She's actually, I think, maybe a slight underdog here. And if she's a slight underdog, I think that's a solid fight. This is the only women's fight on the card, if I'm not mistaken. And we get to watch Tracy Cortez, so who's going to complain? All right, moving on up the card. Kai Kamaka III taking on Luke Riley. This is one of my favorite fights on the card. Luke Riley, I am a big fan of. Undefeated prospect, coming off of a couple of very nice wins inside the UFC. Had a great fight last time out against Michael Aswell. Super nice knockout win against Bogdan Grad in his UFC debut. He's taking on Kai Kamaka. Kamaka is coming off of a razor thin split decision win over Dakota Hope. I bet on Hope in that fight. I really thought Hope won, to be completely honest with you. But I do think Kamaka, it wasn't like some atrocious robbery by any means. It was a pretty close fight. Kamaka spent a lot of time outside the UFC fighting in Tough Enough and Bellator. This is his second stint in the UFC, starting 1-0 in his comeback. But I think this is going to be a tough cookie to take down here in Luke Riley. Riley is going to be 2 inches taller. They do both have the same 69-inch reach. I think Riley's going to get this one done by KO. The striking's too good, in my opinion. Former Cage Warriors legend, he's got a bunch of power. If you don't believe me, watch that Bogdan Grad fight. It's incredible. He's really spun Bogdan's head basically 180 degrees. It was pretty disgusting. And I really like Riley. He's one of my favorite picks on the card, so I'm absolutely going to take Luke Riley here. I'm going to move on up the card to Cody Garbrandt versus Adrian Yanez. This one hurts my heart because I love Cody Garbrandt so much. He's one of my favorite fighters. The run against TJ Dillashaw, those fights were always fun to watch. Obviously, the Dominic Cruz fight is legendary. It's when a lot of people became fans of Cody Garbrandt. But I just can't pick him anymore. I can't. Yanez looked really sharp his last time out against Ricky Simon, who's a guy I rank very highly. It was a draw, a majority draw in that fight. I do think that was a pretty bad decision. I think as a guy who bet on Ricky Simon in that fight, I think Ricky lost. I think Yanez did enough to get it done. And I'm not going to let him burn me and make the same mistake this time. Garbrandt in his last fight absolutely would have lost to Zhao Long if it wasn't for the multiple groin strikes, and then after the groin strikes, literally running around in the octagon to avoid, any damage happening to make him lose the fight. That is literally the only reason he won. 2 fights before that, took on heavy grapplers and Ryan Barcelos and Davison Figueiredo. Lost both of those fights, one by submission, one by decision. And then before that, had wins over Traven Jones and Brian Kelleher. Those haven't aged too well. Those guys are outside of the UFC now. I like Garbrandt. I hope he can come back and win. I'm probably not going to bet on this fight, considering I think Yanez is probably going to close anywhere from minus 400 to minus 500. So I don't see the value on the side of Yanez. I think Garbrandt and Yanez aren't that far apart for that wide of a betting discrepancy. I am going to take Yanez as my official pick here. Probably not going to be betting on it at all. If I do, maybe I'll just put a little sprinkle on Cody because I'm a fan. But that's definitely not betting advice. I think Yanez is the pick here, but I don't see the value there. So moving on up the card, I believe this is the UFC debut of Gable Stevenson taking on Elisha Ellison. Gable, I believe, is the largest favorite in UFC history at minus 4,000, I think, is what he was at. I think he's floating closer to minus 2,500, minus 3,000 now in most books, which would still either tie him or have him close to being the leader for the widest margin in UFC history. There certainly are some question marks around Gable. He is only 3-0 as a professional fighter. All 3 of those fights are wins by knockout, 1 on LFA, and 2 on smaller fighting promotions that I'm not really familiar with. Gable, obviously, pretty famously, gold medal winning wrestler for Team USA, and one of the best collegiate wrestlers of all time in Minnesota. I think he's going to take over the UFC by storm. I think this is going to be fun. Hopefully, they're pretty slow with him. They sort of give him the Bo Nickal treatment. Let him fight a couple of guys that are, definitely below his skill level on the wrestling side. Because I think if they try to fast track him too quick against a pretty decent ranked fighter in the UFC, I don't know, there's a chance that the striking becomes an issue, and he could get knocked out. I don't think this is going to be an issue in this fight. There's a reason the dude's floating between minus 2,500 and minus 4,000. It's pretty obvious he's going to finish Elisha Ellison here. Don't get me wrong with Ellison. Taking on Pericic is no easy feat. I think Pericic is actually going to be one of the best heavyweights in the UFC pretty shortly. But he's definitely drawing the short end of the stick here, having to take on Gable Stevenson in Stevenson's UFC debut. And I think Stevenson's going to get this one done probably in the first round. Moving on up the card, we got Robert Whittaker versus Nikita Krylov. Super, super fun one here. Whittaker's on a tough stretch of fights, so he's moving up to 205 pounds to see if that is going to be the answer for him. He's taking on Nikita Krylov, who's coming off of a pretty nice win against Modestas Bukauskas by KO in his last fight. Before that, he was knocked out 2 fights in a row, though, against Dominic Reyes and Bogdan Guskov. Whittaker, obviously back-to-back losses at middleweight against Khamzat Chimaev and RDR. But before that, had decent wins against Ikram Aliskerov and Paulo Costa. Costa, a guy who is now kind of moved up to light heavyweight. I know he's ranked at light heavyweight now. I don't know if he's going to bounce between the divisions, but definitely has a really nice win over Azamat Murzakanov at light heavyweight now. So that win over Paulo has aged pretty well for Whittaker. And I think Whittaker, he's a smart striker. And I think the power is going to translate. I think he's going to see a power boost here at 205. Krylov, a guy who's been pretty chinny, is probably gonna, try to rush in there, probably get into boxing exchanges pretty early. And I think Whittaker can catch him. I saw a video of him today with Max Holloway, and Whittaker looked big. He looked really big for 205. I was honestly surprised at how much larger, bulkier he looked, jumping up from 185 to 205. That is one of the bigger jumps in the UFC, a 20-pound jump from that weight class. So I'm going to lean Robert Whittaker here. I think he's still got some good fights in the bag. He is slightly older than Krylov, and obviously he's going to be the smaller fighter considering he spent the majority of his career at middleweight. But I love Bobby Knuckles, and I think he gets this one done. I know it's pretty razor thin on the odds. I want to say I found him anywhere from minus 125 up to minus 140. But I am going to lean on Whittaker, and I probably will be betting on him either by knockout or for that fight to not go the distance, because I feel like that's a pretty safe bet. Moving on up the card, a fight that's definitely not going to go the distance. We got Terrence McKinney versus Bobby Green. This fight should be awesome. I mean, it should be over in one, right? Terrence McKinney, obviously, pretty famously has, I want to say, 26 fights professionally. All of them have ended inside the distance. I want to say close to 20 of them in the first round. He's taken on Bobby Green, who, after one of the worst and, most brutal knockouts in UFC history, that spinning wheel kick against Mauricio Rufy, who does look like a title contender now, so it is aging pretty good. Has gone on a 3-fight win streak, winning fights, split decision win against Lance Gibson Jr., knockout win over Daniel Zellhuber, who is a pretty well-touted prospect, and then most recently he submitted Jeremy Stevens. And that was only a little less than 2 months ago on the Chimaev versus Strickland card. So this is going to be an interesting one. Terrence is the slight favorite here, and I gotta agree here. Terrence is just a brawler, dude. He comes out there. I think he gets a little bit better every fight. Yes, he does make mistakes. Bobby is definitely a technical fighter. He's pretty smart, but Terrence is he's a wrecking ball. He comes in there trying to finish the fight as quickly as possible. He will run directly at Bobby Green if he has to. And he's going to do anything in his power to win. He's got great striking. He's honestly got really good jiu-jitsu too. And so I think Terrence is going to win this one by sub or decision, or sub or KO. Definitely not sub or decision. I think, this fight to go the distance is going to be like over plus 1,000 probably, considering Terrence has literally never gone the distance. I'm going to lean with Terrence. I think he's going to end the hype train of Bobby Green here. Bobby's about 8 years older than Terrence. I know these two are allegedly friends, but I think Bobby sort of played that up a little bit more than Terrence did. Terrence was like, I got the opportunity to fight on a Mcgregor card. I'm going to take it. I don't care who it's against. So, I think Terrence is going to get this one done. I'm going to lean with him. And we're going to move on up the card. Brandon Royval versus Leonard Kavanagh. Super fun one here. Kavanagh obviously coming off the biggest win of his career against Brandon Moreno. Whereas Royval, he's found himself in a tough stretch with 2 straight losses against Joshua Vaughn, the champ, and Manel Kape, who very well could be the next title challenger against Joshua Vaughn. So, it's tough to run into the champ and then the guy who's probably about to fight the champ in 2 straight fights. He did get knocked down by Vaughn and then knocked out by Kape. Do I think Kavanagh has the type of power to put out Royval? I could see it, but I don't think it's the same power as Manel Kape. Manel Kape is, I think a lot of people think he's probably a steroid user for many different reasons. And I think Royval, typically has had a pretty decent chin, aside from, that pretty nasty knockout in his last fight. Royval has always been a fun underdog to take. And so it's just one of those situations where I kind of feel like I have to take Royval. He's been my favorite flyweight for as long as I can remember. I bet on him when he beat Tatsuro Taira. I bet on him when he beat Brandon Moreno back in the day. And both of those fights he was an underdog in. I want to say he's been an underdog in like 5 straight fights. This will be the 6th. So yeah, give me Royval. I think Kavanagh still has too many things that he needs to polish. Yes, he's coming off a nice win against Brandon Moreno. Moreno did not look himself in that fight. I don't know what the issue was. I don't know if there was an injury there or something going on, but definitely not what I would have expected out of a Brandon Moreno fight. I thought he was going to school Kavanagh. Kavanagh did win 3 rounds to 2 pretty clearly on that fight. But I don't think he's going to be able to do it this time. I think Royval is going to get it done, whether that be by knockout or by decision. All right, moving on from Royval and Kavanagh, we got my boy Corey Sandhagen taking on Mario Bautista in a rematch. Corey already won this fight the first time around, and I think he's going to do it again. I love the Sandman. Before Peter Yan took down Merab Dvalishvili, I think Corey gave Merab his biggest challenges in a long time. And I think he learned a ton from that fight. He obviously hasn't fought since then. Before that, had a couple nice wins. Beat Chito Vera, beat Rob Font, beat Figgy by knockout. Well, was an injury. And then his only losses, over his last 5 fights are to Umar, who only has 1 loss in his in his whole career, and that was to Merab. And then most recently lost to Merab. And then I think, Mario Bautista, don't get me wrong, this dude, he's awesome. He does everything right as a UFC fighter. He's super smart. He's got decent stand-up. He's got great wrestling, great jiu-jitsu. And he's had a nice run of fights. The only guy he's lost to, also Umar Nurmagomedov. They both share that loss, Sandhagen and Bautista. That isn't the only guy Bautista's lost to, but that's the only guy he's lost to over his last 5 fights. In that time, he's got wins over Ricky Simone, Jose Aldo, Patchy Mix, and then most recently, a really nice win over Vinicius Oliveira that sent Oliveira up a weight class. Corey's a little bit older here, but he is the taller fighter with the longer reach. He's got incredible stand-up. He's got great wrestling, great jiu-jitsu. He always puts together an awesome game plan. I want to say he's Elevation Fight Team. Always putting together an incredible game plan with Trevor Whitman in his corner, training with the lightweight champion now and Justin Gaethje. I think that gym is doing great things right now. They're putting together flawless game plans. We saw that against, Patty and Gaethje. We saw that against Gaethje and Ilya. And I think we're gonna see it again here. I think Sandhagen is gonna do the rare, taking the rematch. Rematch fighters and rematch fights in the UFC typically go the other way. But I don't think that's gonna happen here. I think Corey's gonna school Mario. And I think he's just going to go out there and just outclass him in every aspect. I like Mario, don't get me wrong, but Corey's probably my favorite bantamweight, and I think he's going to get this one done. Moving on up to the co-main event. Super fun one. Paddy Pimblett versus Benoit Saint Denis. Paddy's the underdog here, and that kind of surprises me. I can't lie. I mean, I think that Paddy is just a much more well-rounded fighter. I think, this dude he's coming off of a 5-round fight against Justin Gaethje, who literally just finished Ilia Topuria, who, before that fight, a lot of people were calling potentially the greatest mixed martial artist of all time. And Paddy didn't get finished by him. He looked decent on the feet. He's obviously got decent wrestling and good Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Benoit Saint Denis has shown a lot of holes throughout his career. Yes, he's on a 4-fight win streak. One of those wins is against Kyle Prepolek. Doesn't really count. The Mauricio Rufy win has clearly started to age really well. He exposed a pretty big hole in Rufy's grappling. Since then, knocked out Dariush. Don't know how to feel about that. I think that's a pretty easy fight for most guys. And then he's coming off of a win against Dan Hooker. Yes, the Rufy win is good. Dan Hooker, Beneil Dariush, Kyle Prepolek. I think most guys in the top 10 are finishing all of those dudes, And Paddy, I think, certainly is going to beat Dan Hooker and Beneil Dariush and Kyle Prepolek if they were to fight as well. Paddy obviously doesn't have the greatest opponents as well. His best win is probably against Michael Chandler. He obviously beat Tony Ferguson and Bobby Green. So this is a little bit of a step up in competition. But, he looked good in that fight against Gaethje. He had the chance to be the champ. Gaethje did take it to him, don't get me wrong. He beat him down in that fight. But there was a lot of positives that Paddy can take from that fight. And I think he's going to take those into this BSD fight, and he's really going to put on a performance. I think he's going to get a win. And then I wouldn't be surprised if what's next for Paddy is one of the big guys like Arman Tsarukyan, like Ilia Topuria in an Ilia bounce-back fight if Ilia doesn't get to fight Justin right away, or even a Justin rematch if it's an absolutely insane performance from Paddy. So, don't call me crazy if Paddy comes out here, finishes BSD in 1, and calls for some crazy big fight like one of those 3 that I just said. The fact that he's the underdog is wild to me. I do think a lot of people are going to be on the side of him, so that does worry me a little bit, especially, with how betting is on the UFC. But I do think Paddy has it to get, has what it takes to get this done. I think there's a lot of holes in Benoit Saint Denis' game. I don't think the stand-up is that good. He leaves his hands by his sides a lot. He has good power, but, Paddy's shown that he can take powerful shots pretty easily. And that's going to move us on to the fight that we have all been waiting years for, the return of the Mystic Mac. Conor McGregor is back, taking on Max Holloway at 170 pounds. This is going to be wild. This is going to be absolutely wild. Conor is the shorter fighter here. He does have a reach advantage, and he's going to be significantly larger than Max Holloway. I'm telling you guys this right now. 3 fights ago, that is, Holloway fought at 145 pounds. His last 2 fights have been at 155, but the jump from 145 just 3 fights ago all the way to 170 is a big jump. And he only fought, 3 months ago, almost 4 months ago now, against Charles Oliveira at 155, and he's moving up to 170. This is 2 weight division jump from just 3 fights ago for Max Holloway. I love Max. Max is great. He's a stand-up dude. He's an amazing striker. He's one of the best fighters in UFC history. Do not get me wrong. I just think that Conor McGregor is so much more of a live dog than people are making him seem, especially people within the UFC community. I think that casual fans of the sport clearly are going to bet on McGregor because he's coming back, It's the Mystic Mac, and he's back, and you want to put some money on him. Sure, I get that, I think that UFC media, hardcore UFC fans who just say that Max Holloway is going to run by with this fight are crazy in my mind. I truly believe that. Conor has not stopped training. This whole time, he has not stopped training. There's no doubt in my mind that he's done steroid cycles. He's gotten significantly larger. The steroids have left his system. He's pissed clean. He's been clean for over a year now. He looks huge. He looks massive. He looks like a big 170-pound fighter. Yes, he's only 5'9". Yes, Holloway's a bit taller, but Conor's got really nice long reach, 74-inch reach. That can hang at welterweight for sure. And Conor, people forget this dude has pretty good wrestling and grappling. He did beat Max Holloway last time around with a heavy grappling approach. I wouldn't be that surprised if he tries to implement some wrestling, especially late in this fight. But I think Conor can get this one done early. I really do. I think the power is going to translate to 170 pounds so much more than it will for Max Holloway, because Conor's done it. He did the full dirty bulk. He got all the way up to that 200 plus pound range. Spent years training. Spent years getting his body in shape. Now he's going to look like a fit 170 pounder, whereas Max is just fast tracking his way to 170 here. Is that going to mean that, Max is still not going to be an absolutely phenomenal volume striker? No, absolutely not. Max will totally be a volume striker. That's incredible. But, with that being said, I think that Conor has the power to put Max out here. Max has been knocked down in 3 straight fights. I know a lot of people say that the Gaethje fight was a slip, but I do think it was a knockdown. Then he did get knocked down by Dustin, obviously knocked out by Ilya. And then, I don't think he got knocked down by Charles, but obviously got the brakes beaten off of him against Charles. I think Max is a beatable fighter. I really do. And I think Conor's going to come back and put on an absolutely incredible performance. I know it's been a long time outside of the UFC for Conor, but if anybody is going to do it, it's going to be the Mystic Mac. So my official pick is Conor McGregor. I think he's going to come back. I think he's going to impress. And I think he is going to get this one done. Now, in terms of how my bets look, my big bet of the week, I threw a 3-leg parlay on Luke Riley, Paddy Pimblett, and Conor McGregor. I'm going to flash that up on the screen. I believe $25 is to win about $220 or something like that. Aside from that, a couple bets that I like. I love the Robert Whittaker Krylov fight to not go the distance. I do think that Damian Pinas is going to win by KO. I think, Corey Sandhagen by KO or decision, I think is a great pick. Roy Vol, if you want a straight dog to throw, some money on this week, is just a money line underdog. Roy Vol is great. So I'm going to flash up a couple of those bets on the screen. Just like always, feel free to trail with however much you want. I think that we're going to win some money this week. I'm feeling great about this card, and I am just so excited about this card. Can't thank you enough if you sat through this and watched this all. Hopefully I'm going to be back on posting, either weekly or bi-weekly, trying to change some things up. I'm so pumped. I'm excited to talk about this next week after this fight card is over. If you sat around and watched this whole thing, thank you. Make sure you press the subscribe button. Make sure you leave a comment. Start some discourse down in the comments below. I'd really appreciate it. So, there's more to come for sure. I'm glad to be back. I'm glad the Mac is back. And I'll see y'all next time. Peace.